Bring your buyers right in. The owner's already given the green light.
That's what the HOA president shouted on her cell phone as she pulled a duplicate key from her purse and walked 3 realtors into my living room on a Saturday afternoon. What she didn't know was that I was already sitting in the leather chair by the fireplace with a cup of black coffee, a copy of my unlisted deed on the table, and 2 state real estate investigators waiting in an SUV across the street. I had spent 6 weeks listening to her steer realtors toward my home like she held the title. That's the move of a woman who confused an HOA badge with a deed of trust one too many times. So I did not stand up fast. I did not raise my voice. I just smiled and asked them to please come in. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below. Would you have spoken first, or let her keep talking? My name is Wesley Tatum, and I have spent the last 18 years catching people who steal houses on paper. Senior fraud investigator for Magnolia State Title Insurance, Texas Hill Country region. I have closed cases on equity skimmers in Houston, deed forgers in Austin, and fake foreclosure rings in San Antonio. I have testified to 2 grand juries. I have never once raised my voice in a deposition. When you hunt this kind of fraud for a living, you learn that loud people lose. Quiet people win. When my wife Adeline died of a brain aneurysm 4 springs ago, I asked Magnolia State if I could go remote 3 days a week. They said yes. I packed up our house in Austin and moved my son Holden, then 8, to a stone and cedar ranch on 1.8 acres in Bluestem Ridge Estates, outside New Braunfels in Comal County. Holden is 12 now. He plays second trumpet in the middle school band. He still asks for his mother every August on her birthday. So do I. I picked Bluestem Ridge for the live oaks. There is one in our front yard older than the state of Texas, with a canopy as wide as a barn and a low limb where Adeline once said she wanted to read on Saturday mornings. I tied a hammock to that limb the week we moved in. I have read on it almost every Saturday since. Holden does his algebra homework in it on warm afternoons. The breeze comes in soft off the Guadalupe River, and the cicadas climb their slow August chorus in the brush. It is a quiet place. It is supposed to be. The HOA president was Brielle Whitcomb. Mid-50s, blonde, champagne Range Rover, Lilly Pulitzer prints from Memorial Day to Labor Day. She met me at the mailboxes the first week. She handed Holden a juice box. She told me Bluestem Ridge had an opportunity for early list inventory if we ever decided the property was a little big for just the 2 of us. That was the second sentence she ever spoke to me. I smiled. I said our family would be staying. She smiled back and said, "You'll let me know if anything changes." Her husband Foster was a regional manager for a national home builder out of Round Rock. Between them, they had been on the Bluestem Ridge board for 7 years, 3 terms, no challengers. I made a mental note. I did not write it down yet. That first summer in Bluestem Ridge was the hottest on record in Comal County. The asphalt on our cul-de-sac softened enough by 3 in the afternoon that Holden's bike left little treaded prints behind it when he rode back from a friend's house. The cedar siding on our ranch smelled warm and clean at sundown, that particular dry resin smell Texas cedar gives off when the day cools. I sat on the porch every evening that August with a glass of ice water, watching the light drop behind the live oak, teaching Holden the names of birds his mother had once taught me. Mourning dove, eastern screech owl, painted bunting. She had kept a little spiral notebook of sightings. I had found it in a shoebox 6 months after she died. I did not throw any of it away. The first fine landed in late April, $350. The cited violation, non-conforming mailbox numerals. My mailbox numbers, painted in standard cream against navy blue, did not match the approved Bluestem Ridge font palette. I had checked the CC&Rs before we moved in. There was no font palette. I paid the fine through the portal. I screenshotted the receipt. I filed it in a folder labeled Bluestem on my desktop. The second fine landed in May, $250. Cited violation, improper mulch coloration. I had used cedar mulch from the same garden center every other resident on my street used. I paid. I screenshotted. I filed. The third fine landed in June, $400. Cited violation, excess oak leaf litter on driveway. I had blown my driveway clean the previous Sunday, and a wind out of the south had moved a fresh layer in by Tuesday morning. I paid. I screenshotted. I filed. 3 fines in 8 weeks, each one signed Brielle Whitcomb, HOA president. with the same stiff cursive she used on the welcome card she had taped to the cooler of pre-mixed lemonade at the Memorial Day pool party. Each one perfectly legal under the CC and Rs as written. Each one perfectly nonsense in practice. Holden noticed before I did. "Dad," he said one night over chicken thighs, "is the lady with the big white truck mad at us?" I set my fork down. I considered the question. "No, buddy," I said. "I think she wants something we are not going to give her." He thought about that for a second. Then he said, "Like the hammock tree?" I looked up at him, 12 years old, trumpet kid, freckles across his nose like Adeline had at 12. "Maybe the whole yard," I said. "Are you going to let her have it?" "No." "Good," he said, and he kept eating. The first realtor showed up on a Saturday in early July. White Lexus SUV, paper plates, leather portfolio under one arm. He rang the doorbell while I was scrambling eggs. Holden answered first. By the time I made it to the foyer, the realtor was already 3 sentences in, telling Holden it was nice to meet the young man of the house, and that he had heard from a friend of the family that we might be considering a move. I stepped between them. "Can I help you, Mr. Tatum?" he said, pivoting smoothly. "Tate Drennan, Hill Country Premier. I'm so sorry to drop in on a Saturday. The HOA president mentioned your property might be entering pre-listing inventory, and I just wanted to introduce myself before the showings begin." I did not blink. "Showings? She mentioned you'd want to move quickly," he said. "I represent 6 families looking specifically in the Blue Stem Ridge price range." I asked Tate Drennan to please step onto the porch. I asked him for a business card. I asked him for the name of his managing broker. I asked him, polite as a Sunday hymn, to put in writing what he had just told me, by email, before he left the driveway. He did not. He left the porch in the kind of hurry that tells you a man knows he has stepped in something. I went inside, sat down at my kitchen table, and started a new folder. I named it Blue Stem Realtors. Tate Drennan was the first entry. I wrote down the time, the date, the make of his car, the words I remembered him saying, and the fact that he had introduced himself to my 12-year-old son before he asked if a parent was home. That last detail mattered. In Texas, that is a real estate commission rule violation all by itself. The second realtor showed up 9 days later. Different brokerage, Cadillac sedan, a blonde woman in a navy blazer named Jenna Mossberg. She rang the bell in the middle of an afternoon thunderstorm. I let her stand under the porch awning while she pitched her speech. The HOA mentioned this was a pre-listing situation. The HOA does not own this property, ma'am. Oh well, Brielle thought. Brielle does not own this property either. She fumbled. I waited. I have waited out professional witnesses with more steel in them than Jenna Mossberg. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Tatum. I must have misunderstood. You didn't—" She gave me the name. Then she gave me her business card. Then she got back in her Cadillac and drove off into the rain. 2 entries now in the Blue Stem Realtors folder. Same source, same lie, different brokerages. That was the moment a pattern stopped looking like coincidence and started looking like a referral pipeline. That night, after Holden was in bed, I sat in my office with a glass of cold, sweet tea, the ceiling fan ticking overhead, and pulled up the Comal County Appraisal District public records. I searched the last 5 years of property transfers in Blue Stem Ridge. 28 homes had changed hands. That sounded like a lot for a 240-home subdivision. Then I sorted them by sale price relative to county assessed value. 8 transfers stood out. Sale prices that were 9 to 14% below the appraisal district's assessed market value. All 8 had been purchased within 30 days of listing. All 8 had been resold within 18 months for an average gain of 41%. All 8 had been bought by the same shell entity, Heritage Trail Development, LLC. I stared at that name for a long time. I knew it from somewhere. I pulled up the Texas Secretary of State's business records portal. Heritage Trail Development, LLC was registered to a managing member named Lyle Whitcomb, Brielle's brother-in-law. I closed the laptop slowly. I did not turn off the office light right away. I sat there listening to the cicadas and to Holden's box fan running in the room down the hall. Outside, somewhere in the brush, a screech owl made the sound it makes when something small has gone very still. That was the night I knew. Brielle did not slow down. The week after Jenna Mossberg drove off in the rain, Brielle taped a yellow notice to my front door. It was stapled to a sheet of Blue Stem Ridge letterhead, and it informed me, in all capital letters, that the HOA was scheduling a mandatory exterior fire and safety inspection of my property the following Wednesday. The notice required me to provide interior access from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. so that, qualified inspectors could verify smoke detector placement and structural integrity. Texas HOAs do not have interior inspection rights. Period. Not under the Texas Property Code. Not under the Texas Residential Construction Liability Act. Not under any subdivision covenant in the state. Smoke detectors are between a homeowner and his fire marshal. Structural integrity is between a homeowner and his county building official. An HOA can fine you for grass that is too tall. It cannot walk into your living room. I emailed Brielle a polite two-sentence response. The first sentence cited Texas Property Code Section 209.0085. The second sentence informed her that any unauthorized entry would be treated as criminal trespass under Texas Penal Code Section 30.05. She emailed back 40 minutes later. The email did not address either statute. It said, instead, that her qualified inspectors had concerns about my property's occupancy density, and that I would be receiving a formal hearing notice within 10 business days. She also mentioned that comparable Blue Stem Ridge homes had expressed strong interest in helping me consider relocation options. That last line was the tell. She was telegraphing. I forwarded both emails to a colleague at Magnolia State who did pro bono consultations for our claims division. She wrote back that night with one line. Wesley, you're being prepared. Document everything. The next morning I started installing cameras. I did it quietly. 3 Wise cams on the eaves. 1 on the front porch, 1 on the back patio, 1 looking down the side gate. 2 interior cams in the foyer and the kitchen, set to motion-activated record with cloud backup. A doorbell cam on the front door. A dash cam in my truck pointed at the driveway whenever I parked it. I labeled every device and added them to a single mobile dashboard on my phone. Then I did something my 18 years of work had taught me to do before any sting. I made my house look unprotected. I left the side gate unlocked one afternoon while I was supposedly running errands. I parked Holden's bike on the driveway in plain view. I left the porch light off. I let 3 days pass. The cameras caught Brielle walking the perimeter of my yard twice in those 3 days. Once at 11 a.m. with a man I did not recognize. Short, heavy-set, clipboard, contractor lanyard, no logo. Once at 6 a.m., alone, walking slowly along my back fence with her phone out, taking pictures of my windows. Pictures of my windows. With my 12-year-old son sleeping inside. I watched the footage twice that night, sitting at the kitchen table with the green, blue stem folder open in front of me. The third time through, I noticed the angle she held the phone. She was not photographing the house. She was photographing the rooms through the windows. Real estate listing photos. She had been preparing my home for an unauthorized listing. Holden walked into the kitchen for water as I closed the laptop. He was barefoot, blinking in the under cabinet light, his trumpet case still leaning by the back door from band practice. Dad? Why are you up? Working, buddy. He looked at me for a long second. 12-year-olds can read a face better than an FBI examiner. Is it the lady? Yeah, buddy, it's the lady. Do you have her now? I thought about the camera footage, the 6 a.m. window photos, the brother-in-law's shell company, the 8 discounted sales. Yeah, I said, I have her. He nodded once, got his water, padded back down the hall. I sat there a long time after his door closed. Outside, the cicadas were going. Somewhere on the next ridge, a coyote yipped twice and went quiet. Then I picked up my phone and texted my old friend Renata Holloway at the Texas Real Estate Commission. Renata, Wesley, I need a meeting. I have a referral pipeline, a shell entity, and an HOA president walking my fence at 6 in the morning. She wrote back in 2 minutes. Tomorrow, 10 a.m., my office. I did not sleep that night. Renata Holloway had been at TREC for 11 years. She ran the Enforcement Division's Predatory Practices Unit, and she had personally pulled the licenses of 43 Texas Realtors for steering, dual agency violations, and undisclosed compensation arrangements. She was 51 years old, wore reading glasses on a beaded chain, and never spoke until she had finished reading every page in front of her. I sat in her Austin office for an hour while she went through my Blue Stem and Blue Stem Realtors folders without saying a single word. When she finished, she set her glasses down. Wesley, I know. This is a multi-county pattern. I know. Heritage Trail has been on our watch list for 2 years. I figured. We have never been able to tie a board member to the steering. You can now. She leaned back. The chair squeaked. She tapped a pen on the edge of her desk twice, and then said the only sentence she said with any heat in it that morning. Wesley, if we are going to do this, we have to do it cleanly. No vigilante stuff, no leaks, no social media. We do it by the book, or we lose her. I held her eye. By the book is exactly why I called you. She nodded once, and we got to work. Over the next 2 weeks, TREC opened formal preliminary investigations on 3 Hill Country realtors, Tate Drennan, Jenna Mossberg, and a third name I had not yet met, named Holcomb Pratt, who had appeared in property transfer records as the listing agent on 6 of the 8 discounted Bluestem Ridge sales. Renata pulled their commission histories. She subpoenaed brokerage referral logs. She walked over to the Texas Department of Banking and requested a parallel review of Heritage Trail Development's deposit accounts. Brielle, meanwhile, kept escalating. The occupancy density hearing notice arrived on a Tuesday. Bluestem Ridge claimed my home was overoccupied because Holden's bedroom and my office shared a common wall, and evidence suggested that I was operating an unpermitted business from the residence. The notice cited a C&R clause that required HOA approval for any commercial activity conducted at home. I work for a title insurance company, from a home office, like roughly 40 million other Americans. There is no Bluestem Ridge covenant against employment. There is a covenant against operating a retail or service business open to the public, which means a coffee shop, not me. I ignored the hearing notice. I sent it to Renata for her file. 3 days later, my homeowner's insurance carrier called. They had received a concerned neighbor complaint about an unpermitted business operating at my address. They wanted to confirm the property was being used as a personal residence. I confirmed. I asked them to please email me a copy of the complaint. They did. The complaint was filed by Brielle Whitcomb, in her capacity as HOA president, citing community welfare concerns. I sent that to Renata too. Then the school called. Holden's middle school principal, a calm woman named Theodora Pemberton, asked if she could speak to me privately. Someone, she would not say who, had filed an anonymous tip with Texas Child Protective Services, suggesting that my son was being left unsupervised for extended periods at our address. CPS had visited the school that morning. They had spoken with Holden. They had quickly concluded the tip was unsubstantiated. The case was closed before lunch. Principal Pemberton wanted me to know because she had been around long enough to recognize the pattern. "Mr. Tatum," she said, "I have seen this before. Someone wants you out of your house." I thanked her. I drove straight home. Holden was on the hammock under the live oak with a paperback. I sat down on the porch step where I could see him. He waved. I waved back. Then I took out my phone and called Renata Holloway. "She brought CPS in on my son," I said. The words came out flatter than I expected. There was a pause on Renata's end. When she spoke again, her voice had changed. "Wesley," she said, "I'm coming to New Braunfels myself." She drove down on a Friday. We sat on my back porch with iced tea while Holden practiced trumpet in his room, and the cicadas climbed their long August evening song. "We need to accelerate," she said. "How fast?" 3 weeks, maximum. I thought about Holden. I thought about the live oak. I thought about Adeline's hammock. "That works for me," I said. The next Monday morning, Renata's office sent me a sealed PDF. The Texas Department of Banking had pulled deposit records for Heritage Trail Development LLC under their cooperative review with TREC. The record showed something simple and ugly. Over the previous 5 years, Heritage Trail Development had wired exactly $5,000 to a personal Wells Fargo checking account in the name of Brielle E. Whitcomb on 23 separate occasions. 12 of those wires lined up, within 7 days, with closing dates on Bluestem Ridge property sales below market value. Total, $115,000 in undisclosed compensation, paid by a developer to a sitting HOA president who held no realtor's license and was not legally permitted to receive any commission, finder's fee, or referral payment connected to a real estate transaction in the state of Texas. Texas Property Code Section 209.0058 prohibits HOA officers from accepting compensation for any decision affecting the association without full written disclosure to the membership. None of these wires had been disclosed. None had been reported on the HOA's annual financial statements. None had been declared on Brielle's federal tax filings. That was 3 layers of fraud stacked on top of each other. I read the PDF twice. Then I closed my laptop, walked out to the kitchen, and made myself a tuna sandwich because my hands needed something to do that was not punching a wall. Adeline used to say the worst people in the world are the ones who hide behind clipboards. She said it about a school administrator who had bullied a friend of hers out of a teaching job in Austin. She said it about a property manager who had refused to fix a single mother's broken air conditioner in San Marcos one July. She would have said it about Brielle. I missed Adeline's voice on this one specifically. She would have told me, in that flat North Texas drawl of hers, "Wes, burn it down. Legally, properly, but burn it down." I finished the sandwich. I called Renata back at 1:43. "What's the next move?" "We do a coordinated takedown," she said. TREC files license suspension actions on Drennan, Mossberg, and Pratt. The banking department refers Heritage Trail to the Texas Attorney General. The Comal County District Attorney accepts the criminal referral for filing a false CPS report. And we do all of it at the same time, in front of witnesses, somewhere she can't deny. Somewhere like where? Wesley, Renata said. Where would she most want to be standing the day this all comes apart? I thought about Brielle, the pearl white SUV, the clipboard, the way she had walked my fence at 6 in the morning, taking pictures of my son's window. "Inside my house," I said quietly. Renata was quiet for a long second. Then she said, "Make her come." That was the moment the case stopped being defense and started being the trap. That night, I sat on my porch with Holden after he finished his algebra. The crickets were loud. The breeze off the river was cool. He leaned his head against my arm. "Dad?" "Yeah." "Do we have to move?" "No, buddy." "Promise?" "On your mother." He was quiet for a minute. Then he said, "Okay." I sat with him a long time after he fell asleep on my shoulder. The next 3 weeks were the kind of quiet that only comes from preparation. I told Brielle nothing. I paid the next 2 fines on time. I did not respond to her hearing notice. I waved at her white Range Rover when it passed me at the mailboxes. She waved back, mistaking my politeness for surrender. I led her. People who think they are winning stop watching where they put their feet. In private, I built the operation. Renata Holloway and her enforcement deputy, a former Houston PD detective named Augustin Trask, drove down to New Braunfels on a Saturday and walked my house with me. We mapped sight lines. We picked the leather wingback chair in the front parlor as my staging position. It faced the foyer, the front door, and the picture window onto the driveway. We set the placement of 3 new interior cameras to capture the entire entry, the Realtors' faces, and Brielle's hands. Augustin tested the audio levels in 3 positions. Renata reviewed the legal recording requirements under Texas one-party consent law. We were clean. I drove to Comal County Sheriff's headquarters and met with a sergeant named Thomas Bradley. I gave him the blue stem folder and walked him through the timeline. He read it twice. Then he said, "Mr. Tatum, this is a textbook conspiracy to commit fraud. We will be there." He assigned 2 deputies to be in unmarked vehicles within 2 minutes response of my driveway on the day we set the trap. I drove to Austin and met with Assistant District Attorney Marisol Crowder of the Comal County DA's office. She accepted the criminal referral for filing a false report to a child welfare agency under Texas Penal Code Section 261.107. That's a state jail felony in Texas. She also accepted the parallel referral for unauthorized entry, criminal trespass, and conspiracy. I sat down with a Texas Tribune real estate reporter named Eulalie Marquette, who had spent 2 years writing about HOA abuse in the suburbs of Austin and San Antonio. She agreed to the embargo. I would tip her 2 hours before the trap. She would have a cameraman parked 1 street over. I called my sister-in-law Mavis in Fredericksburg and asked her if Holden could spend a long weekend at her place. She did not ask why. She knew. Adeline had been her older sister. She said yes before I finished the sentence. I drove Holden up on a Friday afternoon. He hugged me at the door. He looked up at me. "Dad." "Yeah, buddy." "Get her." Then I drove home. In the meantime, I let Brielle think the trap was a surrender. I emailed her, polite as a Sunday, and asked if she might be willing to meet to discuss the future of the property. I told her I had been reflecting on the size of the home since Adeline's passing. I asked her if she might recommend a few realtors who specialized in the Blue Stem Ridge market. She wrote back inside 90 minutes. She said she was so glad I was being thoughtful and practical. She said she would personally arrange a discreet tour for 3 vetted agents she trusted. She suggested a Saturday afternoon. She suggested I be away so the agents could walk the home freely without seller pressure. I told her Saturday was perfect. I told her I would be visiting family in Fredericksburg. She wrote back, "Wonderful. I'll handle everything." She set the time at 2 in the afternoon. I forwarded the entire email thread to Renata Holloway, Augustin Trask, Sergeant Tomas Bradley, ADA Marisol Crowder, and Eulalie Marquette inside 15 minutes. The reply from Renata came back in 3 words. "Game on, Wesley." The Friday before, I cleaned my house the way you clean a stage. I dusted the mantel. I put fresh tulips in the vase on the entry table, Adeline's favorite. I made a fresh pot of black coffee at 1:30. I poured a single cup. I set the blue stem master file on the coffee table. I put on a clean blue button-down. I sat down in the leather wingback chair facing the foyer. I waited. Outside, the unmarked SUV pulled into the gravel turnout across the street at 1:47. The Range Rover came down Blue Stem Trail at 1:58. The Range Rover stopped at the curb. Brielle Whitcomb stepped out of the driver's side in white capris, a pink sleeveless Lily Pulitzer top, and Tory Burch sandals. She held a leather binder in one hand and her phone in the other. She did not look at the unmarked SUV across the street. She had no reason to. A silver Lexus SUV pulled in behind her. Tate Drennan got out in khakis and a navy polo, sunglasses pushed up on his forehead. A black Cadillac sedan pulled in behind the Lexus. Jenna Mossberg got out in a cream blazer. Behind her, a champagne BMW pulled in. Holcomb Pratt got out in a charcoal suit and tasseled loafers. 3 brokerages. 3 brokerages all attached to the same 8 Blue Stem Ridge sales over the previous 4 years. They gathered on my driveway. Brielle gave them what looked like a mini briefing. She gestured at the live oak. She gestured at the porch. She gestured at the bay window of the front parlor. My window, where I was sitting in plain view, 12 feet behind the glass, in the leather chair. None of them looked up. That is the thing about people who have decided you are not in the room. They stop checking. Brielle led the realtors up the front walk. She paused at the door. She put her phone to her ear and said something. Then she pulled a key from her purse. Not a master HOA key. There is no such thing in Texas. This was a duplicate of my own front door key, which she had obtained the previous summer when she had let an HOA coordinated sprinkler service contractor onto my property to service shared irrigation lines. There were no shared irrigation lines. The contractor had cut my key while standing in my garage. The cameras had captured it. The cameras had captured everything. She slid the key into my deadbolt and turned it. The door swung open. The 4 of them stepped into my foyer. "Right this way, y'all," Brielle said brightly. "The owner is in Fredericksburg with family. We have a clear 2 hours to walk the floor plan." They turned the corner from the foyer into the front parlor. They saw me. Tate Drennan stopped first. He went pale under his tan. Jenna Mossberg made a small sound at the back of her throat. Holcomb Pratt actually took half a step backward into the foyer. Brielle Whitcomb's smile was the last to move. It froze in place for a full 3 seconds before it began to slip, slowly, like a piece of gift wrap losing its tape. I stayed in the chair. "Welcome to my home," I said. "Please, come in, have a seat. We have some things to discuss." Nobody moved. "Mr. Tatum," Brielle said, recovering, There must be some misunderstanding." "There's no misunderstanding, ma'am. You let yourself into my house with a duplicate key you had cut without my knowledge. You brought 3 realtors with you to tour a property that has never been listed for sale. I'd like all 4 of you to please sit down." Tate Drennan sat. Jenna Mossberg sat. Holcomb Pratt sat. Brielle Whitcomb did not sit. "This is private property," she said. The fixed smile was completely gone now. "I am here as the duly elected president of the Blue Stem Ridge Homeowners Association, in compliance with—" "Ma'am," I said, gentle as I could, "yes, it is private property. Mine." Behind me, in the front parlor, the late August light caught the edges of the tulips on the side table. They were the color Adeline had liked best. The pale yellow that she had said reminded her of butter melting on toast. I picked up the manila folder from the coffee table and slid it across to Tate Drennan. Then a second folder to Jenna Mossberg, then a third to Holcomb Pratt. Each folder was labeled with that realtor's name in black marker. Each folder contained the same 4 documents: a copy of my deed in my name only, a printout of the Texas Penal Code section on criminal trespass, a TREC complaint pre-filled with that realtor's license number, and a copy of the bank wires from Heritage Trail Development LLC to Brielle Whitcomb's personal account. Tate Drennan opened his folder. He read the first page. He turned to the second. He turned to the third. When he got to the 4th, the bank wires, his shoulders dropped. "Oh God," he he whispered. He looked up at Brielle. Brielle did not look back at him. That was the moment her own people stopped protecting her. Brielle's smile finally collapsed. The bright, HOA president brightness slid off her face, and what was left underneath was a mid-50s woman in pink linen who knew, in real time, that she was watching a 5-year operation come down on top of her. This is illegal recording, she tried. This is Texas, I said, and Texas is a one-party consent state. I am the owner of this home. I am the consenting party. Every camera in this house is legal. You set us up. Ma'am, I sat in my own living room and waited for you to commit 5 separate violations of state law on my property. I did not set you up. I declined to stop you. She looked around the room as if she were searching for the exit. The realtors sat very still on the couch. None of them met her eye. Tate, she said. Tate Drennan did not look up from the folder. Jenna Mossberg was already pulling out her phone. She was, I realized, dialing her broker. Holcomb Pratt, the silver-haired one, the one whose name had appeared on 6 of the 8 Blue Stem Ridge fire sale closings, finally spoke. He spoke quietly. He spoke without looking at her. You said the owner had agreed to sell. Holcomb, You said the owner was motivated. You said, he said carefully, that you had handled the owner's authorization personally, and that I did not need to verify it independently. The room was very quiet. Brielle did not have a sentence for that. There was no sentence available. I picked up the manila folder labeled Brielle that had been sitting on the side table next to the tulips. I stood up. I walked across the parlor. I held it out to her. This one is yours, I said. She did not take it. I set it on the coffee table in front of her. You can read it now, I said, or you can read it after the deputies are done with you. Either is fine. She sat down then. Her knees folded the way knees fold when a body has decided, without consulting the brain. She landed in the wingback chair across from mine. She opened the folder. The first page was a copy of the duplicate key, with a screenshot from my garage camera, showing the contractor cutting it on my workbench in August of the previous year. The second page was a chronological log of every Blue Stem Ridge fine she had personally signed against my property, 11 of them, totaling $4,700 over 6 months, every single one for an offense not actually contained in the CC&Rs. The third page was a photo from one of my exterior cameras. Brielle Whitcomb, at 6 in the morning, standing under my back porch light, photographing my son's bedroom window with her phone. She made a sound. It was not a word. It was the sound a person makes when they have understood something far too late. The fourth page was the bank wire schedule from Heritage Trail Development, LLC. 23 wires, $115,000. Her own name, her own account number, her own pattern. The fifth page was a printout of the email she had filed with Texas Child Protective Services on a Wednesday afternoon 9 days earlier, suggesting that my 12-year-old son was being left unsupervised for extended periods at our address. She stared at that one for a long time. Her mouth moved twice. No sound came out. I sat back down in my chair. I did not say anything. Outside, a vehicle door closed quietly, then a second one, then a third. I had texted Renata when the realtors sat down on the couch. The 2 unmarked SUVs across the street had moved. Sergeant Tomas Bradley and Deputy Yarrow McKinley had circled the block once and were now walking up my front path. So was Renata Holloway. So was Augustin Trask. So was ADA Marisol Crowder. I heard their footsteps on the porch boards. Brielle heard them too. Her head came up slowly. I did not move from the chair. I did not turn to the door. Come in, I called, voice level. It's open. Tate Drennan exhaled slowly and put his head in his hands. Jenna Mossberg whispered, "Oh, Lord." Holcomb Pratt closed his folder and stared at his own hands. Brielle Whitcomb sitting across from me in the wingback chair, in pink linen, with the Brielle folder open across her knees, and a photograph of my son's bedroom window in her lap, finally looked at me. She did not say anything. She did not have anything to say. The front door opened. Sergeant Tomas Bradley walked into my foyer first. 6'2", gray crew cut, charcoal Comal County uniform, badge polished. Deputy Yarrow McKinley followed him in. Renata Holloway came behind them with a leather portfolio under her arm. Augustine Trask carried a folder marked TREC. Assistant District Attorney Marisol Crowder closed the door quietly behind herself. The 5 of them stopped in the parlor doorway. "Mr. Tatum," Sergeant Bradley said. "Sergeant, are these the parties?" "Yes, sir." He looked at the 4 of them on the couches and chairs. He looked at the folders open in their laps. He looked at Brielle Whitcomb, white-knuckled on the arms of the wingback chair across from mine. Then he looked back at me. "You holding up okay?" "Yes, sir." "Mind if we do this here?" "Please." Renata Holloway stepped forward first. She crossed to the couch and addressed Tate Drennan, Jenna Mossberg, and Holcomb Pratt in a calm, professional voice. "Mr. Drennan, Ms. Mossberg, Mr. Pratt, I am Renata Holloway, Director of the Predatory Practices Unit of the Texas Real Estate Commission. As of this moment, your individual broker licenses are administratively suspended, pending a formal hearing scheduled for the 18th of next month. You are required to surrender your license cards to me before you leave this address. You will receive written notice within 48 hours. I would advise each of you to retain counsel." Holcomb Pratt nodded once. He took his TREC card out of his wallet. He handed it across the coffee table without making her ask twice. Tate Drennan did the same. His hand was shaking. Jenna Mossberg laid hers down on the cushion beside her without speaking. Augustin Trask collected all three. Then Sergeant Tomas Bradley stepped forward to the wingback chair across from me. "Brielle Eleanor Whitcomb." She lifted her face. "You are under arrest for criminal trespass under Texas Penal Code Section 30.05. Conspiracy to commit real estate fraud under Penal Code Section 32.46, and the filing of a false report to a child welfare agency under Penal Code Section 261.107. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." She did not stand. He had to walk her up out of the chair by her elbow, gentle as he could be. He did not handcuff her in front of me. He did handcuff her on the front porch. The cameras caught it cleanly. ADA Marisol Crowder followed them out and read the formal charging language onto the porch landing, on the record. The Texas Tribune cameraman, parked one street over, walked up the driveway with a long lens and got the entire thing. Brielle did not look back at the house. The three realtors were escorted out separately, in their own vehicles, after Renata read each of them their formal license suspension paperwork on my front porch. None of them looked back either. When the last vehicle left my driveway, the only people left on my property were me, Renata Holloway, Augustin Trask, ADA Marisol Crowder, and the gentle late-afternoon Texas sun coming sideways through the live oak. Renata took off her reading glasses. She rubbed the bridge of her nose. She looked at me for a long second. "Wesley. Yeah, that is the cleanest takedown I have run in 11 years. I had a good investigator. You had Wesley Tatum. I had a wife who would have wanted me to." Renata was quiet for a second. Then she said, very softly, "Adeline would have loved you today." I did not answer. I did not need to. Outside, the cicadas had started their afternoon chorus. The light through the live oak fell across the floor of the front parlor in long gold strips. Adeline's tulips were still on the side table. The cup of black coffee on the coffee table had gone cold. Eulalie Marquette texted me at 4:11. The Texas Tribune story would be up the next morning. The headline she was working with was one sentence long. HOA president walked three realtors into a Texas home she did not own. The owner was sitting in it. I read it twice. Then I drove to Fredericksburg and picked up my son. He was waiting on Mavis's porch with his trumpet case beside him. He stood up when he saw the truck. "Dad." "Yeah, buddy. Did you get her?" I let myself smile then, for the first time in 5 months. "I got her, buddy. I got all of them." He climbed into the truck. He did not let go of my arm the entire drive home. The Texas Tribune story ran on a Wednesday morning. By Wednesday afternoon, 4 other Blue Stem Ridge homeowners had emailed Renata Holloway with their own stories. By Friday, that number was 11. By the following Monday, the Texas Attorney General's Consumer Protection Division had opened a formal investigation into Heritage Trail Development LLC and its referral pipeline across 3 Hill Country counties. The 8 families who had been pressured into below-market sales between 2019 and 2024 were contacted by the AG's office. 6 of them filed civil suits. 5 of those 6 settled within 4 months for restitution, averaging $74,000 per family. 1 went to trial. That one won $310,000 in damages and saw Lyle Whitcomb, Brielle's brother-in-law, indicted for conspiracy to commit real estate fraud. Brielle Whitcomb pled no contest to the criminal trespass and false report charges. She accepted a sentence of 2 years deferred adjudication, 3,000 hours of community service, and a permanent bar from serving on any HOA board in Texas. The fraud charges proceeded to a separate trial. A Comal County jury convicted her on 12 of 14 counts after deliberating for less than 3 hours. She is currently serving 36 months in a state facility outside Gatesville. The 3 realtors lost their licenses permanently. Tate Drennan moved out of state. Jenna Mossberg accepted a paralegal position at a property law firm in San Antonio. Holcomb Pratt, who had cooperated fully with TREC from the day he sat in my parlor, accepted a 5-year suspension and quietly retired. The Blue Stem Ridge HOA was reorganized under court supervision. A new board was elected in March. They asked me to serve as president. I declined. I told them I would serve a single 2-year term as the chair of a brand new homeowner rights committee, with the sole responsibility of reviewing every fine the HOA proposed to issue and confirming it was actually grounded in the CC and Rs as written. We have issued 7 fines in 8 months. All 7 were valid. All 7 were paid without complaint. Blue Stem Ridge has not had a single contested fine since. The settlement money included a small piece I asked the court to release directly. $12,000 was set aside to seed an endowed homeowner legal aid fund at the Comal County Bar Association. It is called the Adeline Tatum Homeowner Defense Fund. It pays for 2 pro bono consultations a month for homeowners in Comal, Hayes, and Guadalupe counties facing predatory HOA practices, equity skimming, deed forgery, or coerced sales. The fund is now in its 3rd year. As of last September, it had served 47 families. 3 of those families kept houses they would otherwise have lost. I gave Renata Holloway the credit at the dedication dinner. She gave it back to me. Holden played his trumpet at the dedication. He played the slow opening line of Amazing Grace while the room stood. 12 years old, 2nd chair, freckles across his nose, the same brown eyes as his mother. Adeline's older sister Mavis sat in the front row and cried into a linen handkerchief that had been their grandmother's. I sat next to Mavis with my hands folded in my lap and listened. The live oak in my front yard is older than the state of Texas. The hammock is still tied to the low limb. Holden still does his algebra in it on warm afternoons. The cicadas still climb their slow August chorus in the brush. The breeze still comes in soft off the Guadalupe River. It is a quiet place again. If you had asked me, the morning the first fine landed in my mailbox, where this would all end, I would have said I just wanted the woman to leave my mailbox alone. Most of us just want the woman to leave our mailbox alone. But every now and then, one of these women, and it is almost always a woman just like Brielle, picks the wrong porch on the wrong Saturday. And when she does, the right answer is not to argue at the mailbox. The right answer is to sit in your own chair, in your own home, and wait for her to come to you. You do not need to be a fraud investigator to do that. You just need to keep records. You need to know your deed. You need to know the difference between an HOA covenant and a property right. And you need to be willing, for one very quiet afternoon, to let the person who has been talking about you finally walk into the room where you have been waiting. If you have ever had an HOA cross a line you did not think they could cross, share your story in the comments. I read every single one. If this story made you feel a little lighter tonight, hit subscribe and stick around. Because next week, I am telling you about the HOA that fined a retired school teacher for the wildflowers on her own front lawn, and the volunteer county botanist next door who turned a Texas state law on protected species into the evidence that got the entire board removed.
Here's what stayed with me about Wesley's story. Brielle Whitcomb did not lose because she walked into the wrong house. She has been walking into the wrong houses for 5 years. She lost because she finally walked into the one where the owner was already sitting in the chair with the fire on the table and the cameras on the eaves. That is the thing about predatory HOA presidents. They do not survive on power. They survive on momentum. The assumption that the next person will be too tired, too embarrassed, or too distracted to push back. Wesley's real advantage was not his 18 years entitled rust. It was that he understood before Brielle ever pulled a key from her purse. That's the strongest place to confront a person who has been talking about you in the room, cheating you are not in. The Adeline Tatum Defense Fund is the proof of what happens when one person decides not to move. If you have ever been steered, fined, or smeared by your own HOA, tell me in the comments. I read every single one. Surprise and hit the bell, because next week I am telling you about the HOA that's fined a retired school teacher for the windows on her own front lawn, and the volunteer county botanist next door who turned a Texas protect species law into the evidence that's got the whole board removed.